Farragher, and I'm the current chair of the Down Syndrome Special Interest Research Group of IACID, and I'm here with Roy Brown, who's the immediate past chair of the DSCIRG. And we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the ways that we've found helpful in doing research with people with Down syndrome. It's good for me to be talking to Roy because Roy was my PhD supervisor. And one of the things that he helped me with was getting an ethical approach to working with people with Down syndrome. And I really wanted to use their names, the dignity of identity, because I was helping to tell a part of their story. So Roy, you've forged the way for a lot of ethics approaches that are a bit different to the usual thing of having people's identity protected. Would you like to say something of that?
Yes, I think it's a challenging issue still, because many universities' ethics committees have members who are not necessarily very much aware of what disabilities are about, and particularly in this case, it was Down syndrome. So that makes it difficult on people who wanted their names to be recorded because they wanted to be equal with other people who are doing the research. And that was written up in the, as I remember it, in the proposal for the ethics committee, and they said, oh, you can't do that. There's got to guard people's security and privacy and so on, and they've got disabilities. So I think I wrote back then and said, well, things are changing in this world, and the importance of people learning about people with Down syndrome, or indeed anybody else with a disability, is that they want choices and they want rights. And if we're going to help that process go on, if they ask to have their names recorded, then that's their right. Maybe it's with parental permission in some cases, and that has to be signed for. And fortunately, when that was put in, the particular ethics committee itself said, yes, we understand what you're talking about. But not all universities understand that. And I think it's important that when people start research, they should, if they're working with people, doing their research with people with Down syndrome or other disabilities, and those people feel they're contributing to this research and that they feel they would like their names recorded, not partly like Fred or Jane, but with their surnames as well, then that should be put into the submission to the ethics committee. And if necessary, discussions should follow, but with the recognition that there will be a signed form releasing the name, for releasing the name, and where necessary, if there is a guardian or a parent who should be notified anyway, I think, in these circumstances, then they would sign also that they thought that was reasonable. I think if that's not accepted, and I'm afraid in my experience is that it's not often an easy passage to get this done, but it is a matter of inclusion, which could be documented at the same time. It is a matter of people's rights and dignity. And so I think we have to fight this one through. I think one also has to remember that the student is in a teaching, being taught in this process, and that's always got to be borne in mind. In other words, a supervisor or supervisory committee, because many universities require a supervisory committee, should be comfortable with backing this and supporting it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we actually get to do research, a lot of my research is in interviewing. So one of the strategies that I've used is to put the person at ease to start with, particularly if they don't know me terribly well, is to use photographs, because it becomes a shared conversation. So we can look together at a photograph that's important to them, or I can show them photographs of some of the situations, and then we can have a conversation where I can get to hear how the particular person I'm talking with, how they phrase things. I can also watch their body language for signs when they might be unsure. And I remember clearly one of my participants, she used to do this whenever she was unsure, and that was a really helpful piece of body language to pick up, because that allowed me to rephrase or give her more guidance. Do you have any particular tips that you found helpful, Roy?
Well, I think one of the things quite early in my career, I was involved in doing and publishing a piece of research on familiarity and unfamiliarity. And it measured people's language, the number of words they used, and they also had a task where they were moving objects around in a puzzle. And even these were young people, so they were below the age of 6. And in all cases, all that we did was, first of all, do the tests in a familiar environment, a classroom, with other kids around and so on. And we had another group that we put in a room next door that the children didn't go to as a rule. And then halfway through, we swapped them around. And as soon as you go into the unfamiliar environment, word counts drop. And also behavioral movements to place things drop. And in fact, it's the only study that I've ever been part of where there was no overlap. Nobody did better in the unfamiliar room, which was next door, than in their regular classroom. And that sort of thing has now been chased up with older people with disabilities. And I think from personal experience and clinical experience, I see it in adults in unfamiliar situations. And I think you see it very readily in older people who may be suffering from Alzheimer's or pre-dementia, and their words, they can't get them in the way they should. So one piece of advice is make things familiar. And in fact, I used to, when I did a lot of clinical work, ask if I could assess youngsters or older people in their home environment. Some parents didn't want that, but clinical situations are unfamiliar. So unless you build familiarity into it before you start work, ideally you need to have them become familiar with you, familiar with the surroundings and the types of things that will be involved. After all, I put it this way: do you want to know what the person can do at their best or at their worst? And I think it's important, critically important, to provide environments where people are likely to do their best.
Yes, and there's also that kindness in the sense of they're doing us a favour in really allowing us to be researchers. So it's really important that we have them as comfortable as possible. And if we bring them into our place where we feel comfortable, that's really not fair.
Let me make a comment on what you said, because I think you said something very important for students to keep in mind. It's not just making the persons who are individuals in the research from whom you're collecting data, or even in clinical practice, comfortable. It's making oneself comfortable. So our facial expressions, our language, the speed at which we talk and so on, is suitable for the occasion in which we are. So there are two sides to this. It's not one or the other, it's both.
So we've both been working in quality of life as a framework around disability studies, and it strikes me that a lot of these issues really tap into quality of life. What are your thoughts?
But over the years, I've worked in quality of life, And first of all, I think it's important to recognize that quality of life has both a quantitative side and a qualitative side. And they both add key information to what one's attempting to do. So also in this situation, we have some guidelines on quality of life. A definition of quality of life is hard to grasp, but well-being is probably, I think, one of the best terms to use in relation to it. And along with it go a load of principles. And I think that if we could use those as a guide into which we pour our research information or our clinical information, then we are going to get more reliable and valid results. And of course, we're going to aid the development, hopefully, of the people that we're trying to support.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's important in terms of doing research with people with Down syndrome, because I think people haven't had an expectation in the past that they could be collaborators, not just researched on, but actually working together to think about problems and issues, research questions from their perspective. And we can, as researchers, use their perspective to gain valuable insights that we couldn't do otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that's critical, because one of the things that one hopes one's able to do is boost self-image, and with boosting self-image to increase motivation. If I were asked for what was the most difficult, challenging thing to work with someone clinically, and it would also be true in research, is people who appear to have no motivation. They've lost any sense that they can do something, achieve something. I can't do it, it's too difficult. And then providing a supportive environment to help them do that. So supposing you got some research where you wanted to help people to do a task of their choice, it might be as simple or as difficult as making a cup of tea or entertaining a friend. Then if they haven't done that before, then building a program that enables them to do it. And always ask, what I do anyway, is ask what their expectations are going to be anyway. And I say, oh, you're going to get further than that. And they say, oh, no, I won't. And I say, no. So I'd have a graph and say, well, that's where you're going. If in reading, for example, this is where I think you'll get to. Knowing full well from results, most people go further. And boy, does that reward, and to what extent it's huge, can affect some people. It doesn't work with everybody, and that's part of the challenge, because you've got to know where to put things in and not to put things in. And that really means getting to know the person well, and them getting to know you well.
Yeah.
Because it's very personal, that a lot of the research that we try to do in quality of life.
That's a very good point to leave on. I think that's right at the heart of it. We do very personal research, and working alongside people with Down syndrome is really a privilege, but it's also something as researchers we need to learn how to do, and we need to keep practicing. So thank you for the conversation today. I've really enjoyed it, as I always enjoy our conversations.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity.